Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Two years ago, we decided to take the kids to the new shopping mall that had just opened. It was one of those fancy places with an indoor play area and restaurants that actually serve decent food, not just fast food. The kids had been asking to go for weeks. The parking situation at this mall was notorious. Everyone knew it got packed on weekends, but we figured if we got there early enough, we'd find a spot. When we pulled into the parking garage around noon, cars were circling like vultures. I drove up and down the levels twice before spotting what looked like the last available space. There was just one problem. A shiny black BMW had parked way over the line, taking up most of two spaces. The car was positioned so that technically there was still a spot available, but it would be tight. Really tight. I found the parking attendant, a young woman, in a bright orange vest. I asked her if this was the only spot left. She confirmed that it was the last one available and explained that their computer system showed the garage was at full capacity. This was my only option if I wanted to park there. I looked at the BMW again. The driver had clearly done this on purpose, probably to protect their precious car from door dings. But I needed to park, and this was supposedly the last spot. I told the attendant I would make it work. I spent about 10 minutes carefully maneuvering my car into the space. I had to get so close to the BMW that there were maybe 3 centimeters between our cars. I had to climb out through the passenger side. My wife and kids thought it was hilarious watching me squeeze out like that. My wife asked if I was sure this was legal. I told her the attendant had confirmed it was a valid spot, and I was within the lines on my side. We spent about 4 hours at the mall. The kids had a blast in the play area, and we managed to get some shopping done. When we came back to the parking garage, I immediately noticed the BMW was gone. That should have been good news, right? More room to get into my car normally. But when we got closer, I saw the problem. 2 of my tires were completely flat. Not just low on air, but completely deflated. My wife asked what had happened to the tires. I told her I thought our BMW friend hadn't appreciated my parking job. I called the parking attendant over to show her the damage. She looked shocked and said it was terrible. She offered to call her manager right away. The manager arrived within a few minutes, a middle-aged guy in a suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He apologized that this had happened but said the parking company take responsibility for vandalism in their garage. I asked about their security cameras, pointing out that this had just happened while my car was parked on their property. He admitted they had cameras but said they give out footage because of privacy policies. I asked him how someone could damage my car on his property and he looked at his own cameras. He said he would send someone to help with my tires within the hour, and that was the best he could do. I was furious, but I want my family standing around in a parking garage all day. My wife took the kids home in a taxi while I waited for help. While I was waiting, I called the police. The police officer asked if I wanted to file a report for vandalism. I said yes and explained that someone had deliberately flattened my tires because they like how I parked. He asked if I had evidence, and I told him the parking garage had cameras, and I was hoping they would cooperate with a police investigation. The officer came out to take the report. When the manager saw the police, his attitude changed quickly. He said they wanted to cooperate and offered to put me in touch with their legal department, explaining that they handled all requests for video footage. The police officer told him they would need that footage as evidence. The manager quickly agreed and promised to make sure the legal department got everything we needed. The mechanic showed up when we were finishing the police report. He filled my tires and checked for any other damage. Thankfully, whoever did this just let the air out rather than slashing the tires. The mechanic said I was lucky because the tires were fine and just needed air. I asked if he saw this kind of thing often. He said more than I would think because people get crazy about parking spaces. Getting the video from the parking company turned out to be a nightmare. For 3 months, I called them every week. First, they sent the police footage from the wrong camera. Then they sent the right camera but the wrong time period. Each time they acted like they were doing me a huge favor. I called their legal department and complained that this was the 3rd time they had sent the wrong footage. They said they were doing their best, and that these requests took time to process. I pointed out that it had been 3 months and asked how hard it could be to find the right camera and the right time. Finally, they got it right. The video showed everything clearly. The BMW owner walking up to my car, looking angry, making gestures at my car, then getting something from his trunk. You could see him crouching by my tires, then walking back to his car and driving away. His license plate was perfectly visible. I amended my police complaint to include vandalism charges and identified the guy from the video. A few months later, I got a letter inviting me to arbitration. I wrote back saying I interested in arbitration and that this was going to court. I added their arbitration offer to my case documentation. A week later, a lawyer called me. The lawyer said his client had made a mistake and that he was young and got angry. He said they were prepared to offer me several $1,000s to settle this quietly. I told him there was no deal because actions have results. He told me to be reasonable and asked if I really wanted to drag this through the courts, mentioning the time and expense involved. I said I had already invested the time and we were going to court. The lawyer said the kid had a bright future ahead of him and asked me not to ruin it over a parking space. I told him that his client should have thought about his future before he vandalized my car. Over the next few months, different lawyers called with different settlement offers. Each time I said no, and each time I documented the call and added it to my case file. They were clearly getting desperate. The court date was set for 11 months in the future. When the day finally came, the guy showed up with his father and their lawyer. I had my lawyer with me too. Their lawyer made one last attempt to settle this reasonably. My lawyer reminded them that I had made my position clear multiple times. The case was pretty straightforward once the judge saw the video. You could see everything clearly. The guy walking up to my car, the angry gestures, him deflating my tires. There, much he could say in his defense. The defendant told the judge he was just angry about the parking situation and think it was that big a deal. The judge responded that vandalism was always a big deal, regardless of his feelings about parking. The verdict came back in my favor. He was found guilty of vandalism and sentenced to 50 days of fines at 50% of the daily rate, which worked out to about $1,700 plus 90 days of home arrest. His lawyer immediately filed an appeal, but it was thrown out a few weeks ago. Last week, I got the news that the verdict was final. The payment deadline was set for October 10th, or else the home arrest would become jail time. Yesterday, they called asking for my bank account information and made the transfer today. On Monday, I'm reporting that payment was received, officially ending this 2-year journey. The part that makes this whole thing even better, I found out through mutual connections that this guy is a university student, and his school accepts home arrest for missing classes. He's going to lose all his credits for this semester. My husband and I work in demanding corporate jobs, where taking time off feels like asking for a miracle. For the past 12 years, we've barely managed to take a proper vacation together. Between deadlines, client meetings, and the constant pressure to prove ourselves, we've been running on fumes. 6 months ago, we finally decided enough was enough. We started planning the trip of our dreams, 15 days exploring New Zealand and Australia. We researched every detail from the hiking trails in Queenstown to the Great Barrier Reef diving spots. The flights alone were over 27 hours each way, but we didn't care. We saved every penny we could, skipping dinners out and weekend trips to fund this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. My mother-in-law has always been the type of person who needs to be the center of attention. At 70 years old, she's mastered the art of creating drama whenever someone else has something good happening in their life. She has several health issues, some real, some seemingly exaggerated depending on the audience, and she's never shy about using them to manipulate situations. 2 weeks ago, she called my husband with news that made my blood run cold. She told him she had scheduled her surgery for the exact same dates we'd be away. When my husband reminded her that we'd be on the other side of the world and had been planning this trip for months, she claimed the doctor said these were the best dates available. I grabbed the phone from my husband because something didn't sound right. I questioned which doctor she was talking about, reminding her that she had said last month her surgeon had openings throughout the next few months. She simply replied that things change and this was when it needed to happen. I asked about other family members who could help, specifically her sister who lived nearby. She dismissed this idea, saying her sister doesn't drive anymore and has her own problems. She also claimed my brother-in-law was too busy with work. My husband looked defeated. I could see the guilt already eating away at him. He suggested we should postpone the trip, but I told him absolutely not. We had put too much into this. That evening, I decided to do some investigating. I called the surgeon's office myself, pretending to be calling on behalf of my mother-in-law to confirm the appointment details. The receptionist told me that she actually had several appointment options available and had specifically requested those dates. They had even moved another patient to accommodate her preference. My suspicions were confirmed. She had deliberately chosen our vacation dates. The next day, my mother-in-law showed up at our house unannounced, which she never does unless she wants something. She told us she had been thinking about her recovery and really needed us both there, asking what would happen if something went wrong. I pointed out that her surgery wasn't even that complicated, and the doctor had said it was routine. She insisted that anything could happen at her age, and she didn't have anyone else. My husband suggested we could arrange for a home health aide since our insurance would cover most of it. She refused, saying she didn't want strangers in her house and needed family. I asked about postponing the surgery by just 2 weeks so we'd be back and could help with everything. She claimed she couldn't wait because her health was more important than our little vacation. That phrase, little vacation, made my eye twitch. I reminded her this wasn't a little vacation, that we had saved for months and hadn't had a real break in over a decade. She responded that when we're her age, we'll understand that family comes first. Over the next few days, she launched a full campaign. She called my husband's work phone multiple times a day, sent guilt-inducing text messages, and even contacted distant relatives to tell them how abandoned she felt. The emotional manipulation was textbook. Then she made a crucial mistake. She called my husband while I was standing right next to him with a phone on speaker. She told him she had spoken to the doctor that day, and he said the surgery absolutely could not be moved. I immediately called the surgeon's office again. The receptionist told me that my mother-in-law had actually called yesterday asking if she could move the surgery up by a week if needed, and they had told her they had flexibility with her procedure. I had caught her in an outright lie. That evening, my husband and I sat down for a serious conversation. I told him she had lied about the doctor's requirements, deliberately picked our dates, and was now lying about not being able to change them. He admitted he knew but still felt guilty about leaving her alone. I reminded him she wasn't alone, she had options but was choosing not to use them because she wanted us to cancel our trip. We decided to call her together and lay out the situation clearly. My husband told her we knew she had other date options for the surgery. She denied this and asked who told us that. I explained that the surgeon's office had confirmed she specifically requested these dates and had even asked about moving the surgery up if needed. There was silence on the other end before she claimed she didn't know what they were talking about. I also told her we knew she hadn't asked her sister for help and that when we called her sister directly, she said she'd be happy to stay for a few days. My mother-in-law dismissed her sister as unreliable. My husband told her that we were going on our trip. We offered to help arrange care, but we weren't canceling. She responded by saying not to come crying to her if something happened while we weren't there, then hung up. The next morning, we received a series of nasty text messages calling us selfish and ungrateful. She sent similar messages to other family members, trying to turn them against us, but her plan backfired spectacularly. My husband's aunt called us that afternoon. She told us she had received some interesting messages from my mother-in-law about how heartless we were, but she had also mentioned she could reschedule if she really needed to. She had accidentally admitted she had other options. My husband's cousin also reached out telling us this sounded exactly like what she did to her sister's wedding 3 years ago. She had scheduled a medical emergency the same weekend and demanded everyone skip the wedding to take care of her. We learned this was a pattern. She had a history of creating medical drama during important family events. Armed with this information, my husband sent a group text to all the relatives who had received her manipulation messages. He clarified that his mother had multiple surgery date options and had been offered help from family members. He explained that she chose our vacation dates specifically and was now lying about her constraints and that we would be going on our planned trip. The response was swift. Instead of the guilt and pressure she expected to generate, family members started calling her out on her behavior. Her sister offered again to help but also told her she was being ridiculous. Her neighbor, who she had also been complaining to, told her she should be happy her son and daughter-in-law were finally taking a vacation. Realizing her manipulation wasn't working, she tried a different approach. She called to say maybe she had been too hasty and could probably reschedule for after we got back. I told her that would be great and we could help with everything once we returned. She claimed she just wanted to make sure we cared about her. My husband assured her we cared but told her we wouldn't be manipulated into canceling our plans. She rescheduled the surgery for 3 weeks after our return. Suddenly, all her claims about urgent timing and doctor requirements disappeared. We went on our trip and had the most amazing 15 days of our lives. We hiked through stunning landscapes, dove in crystal clear waters, and reconnected with each other away from all the stress and drama. When we returned, tanned and refreshed, we helped her with her surgery and recovery just like we had promised. The procedure went smoothly, exactly like her doctor had originally predicted. But the best part came a few weeks later. At a family gathering, someone mentioned our trip and how wonderful our photos looked. My mother-in-law commented that she was just glad nothing serious happened to her while we were gone having fun. My husband's cousin didn't miss a beat and asked if she meant during the surgery she could have scheduled for any time but deliberately picked for our vacation dates. The entire room went quiet. She realized that everyone now knew exactly what she had tried to do. She quickly changed the subject. From that day forward, she never again tried to manipulate our plans with fake medical emergencies. I work as a delivery driver, and on this day I had about 20 packages to deliver across the city, and I was making good time. Around 2 p.m. I pulled into the parking lot of a small strip mall to deliver a package to the pharmacy. The lot was pretty full, but I found a spot near the back that wasn't blocking any traffic or taking up a handicapped space. I've learned to be careful about where I park because some people get really upset about delivery trucks. I grabbed the package and jogged toward the pharmacy. The whole thing should have taken maybe 5 minutes tops. But when I was walking back to my truck, I heard this loud banging sound. Metal on glass. My heart dropped when I saw what was happening. This woman was standing next to my truck with a tire iron in her hands, and she had already put a huge crack across my windshield. She was middle-aged, wearing expensive-looking clothes, and had that haircut that screams, "I want to speak to your manager." She was winding up for another swing. I yelled at her, asking what she was doing to my truck. She screamed back that I couldn't park there because it was for customers only. I told her I was working and had just delivered a package to the pharmacy and that she couldn't destroy my truck like this. She said she didn't care what I was doing and that I was taking up a spot that paying customers needed. She raised the tire iron again and I realized she was completely serious about smashing my windshield to pieces. I quickly pulled out my phone and started recording. I've heard too many stories about crazy encounters like this, and I wanted evidence of what was happening. I told her to please stop because she was damaging my vehicle and that I was calling the police. She told me to go ahead and call them because they would arrest me for trespassing. She swung the tire iron again, creating another crack. That's when something snapped in me. This windshield was going to cost me hundreds of dollars to replace, and I barely make enough to cover my expenses as it is. When she pulled back for a third swing, I lunged forward and grabbed the tire iron from her hands. Immediately, she started screaming that I was attacking her and someone needed to call 911. She was making it sound like I was mugging her or something. People started coming out of the stores to see what was happening. I just held the tire iron away from her and kept my phone recording. I told her that I wasn't attacking her, just stopping her from destroying my property. She demanded I give her tire iron back right away and accused me of stealing it. I explained that this tire iron had come from her car to smash my windshield, and I wasn't giving it back so she could finish the job. She kept screaming and making a scene until the police showed up about 10 minutes later. Two officers approached us, and immediately she ran toward them with tears in her eyes. She told the officers that thank God they were there because I had attacked her and stolen her property, claiming I had been threatening her. One of the officers asked me to tell them what had happened. I explained that I was a delivery driver who had parked there to deliver a package to the pharmacy, and when I came back, she was smashing my windshield with a tire iron. I mentioned that I had the whole thing recorded on my phone. The officer asked if they could see the video. I showed them the footage. You could clearly see her swinging the tire iron at my windshield multiple times, me asking her to stop, and me eventually taking the tire iron away from her. The officers watched the whole thing, and their expressions changed pretty quickly. The second officer told her that based on the video, it looked like she was vandalizing my vehicle, and they were going to need to place her under arrest for destruction of property. That's when she completely lost it. She screamed, asking what they meant, insisting that I was the criminal who had attacked her. She yelled that they couldn't arrest her because she was a taxpayer who knew her rights. The first officer told her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. Instead of complying, she did something I still find hard to believe. She spat directly in the first officer's face, then immediately kicked the second officer right in the groin. He doubled over in pain while his partner wiped the spit from his face. Both officers immediately tackled her to the ground. She was screaming and thrashing around like a wild animal, but they got her face pressed against the asphalt and cuffed her hands behind her back. She kept yelling about lawsuits and discrimination the entire time. The first officer told her that she had just assaulted two police officers and was now looking at much more serious charges. She screamed back that this was police brutality and demanded that someone record what was happening. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was demanding someone record the police while I had just recorded her committing vandalism. They hauled her up from the ground and practically dragged her to the patrol car. She was kicking and screaming the whole way, trying to resist getting in the back seat. It took both officers to shove her inside, and even then she was pounding on the windows and yelling. The officers came back over to me to get my information and a statement. They assured me that she would be charged with vandalism, assault on a police officer, and resisting arrest. They also gave me a case number for my insurance claim. The second officer told me that in 20 years on the force, he had never seen someone go from a simple vandalism charge to multiple felonies that fast. When they drove away with her still screaming in the back seat, I looked at my cracked windshield and just shook my head. All this over a parking spot that I had every right to use for 5 minutes. The pharmacy owner came out and told me he saw the whole thing. He said she wasn't even a customer at any of the stores in the strip mall. She had just been driving by, saw my truck, and decided to take justice into her own hands. I finished my deliveries for the day, but I kept thinking about how quickly things had escalated. A simple delivery turned into watching someone get arrested for multiple felonies because she couldn't control her temper over a parking spot. I found out later that she had to post a $15,000 bond to get out of jail, and her lawyer fees are probably going to cost more than my entire truck is worth, all because she couldn't stand seeing a delivery truck parked for 5 minutes. Back in the early 2000s, I was working as a manager at Hooters. It was actually a pretty fun job most of the time, and I learned a lot about the restaurant business. We had this regular customer who was this older guy, probably in his 60s, who came in almost every day. He was hilarious and always had us cracking up with his jokes and stories. The staff loved him because he was respectful and always tipped well. One day, this old guy decided to play a little prank on us. He was always watching us work and had noticed how we filtered our fry oil every single night. When you filter used fry oil, there's always this layer of cooked flour that gets caught in the filter. It looks kind of like breadcrumbs but darker. Usually we just threw it away, but this guy had a different idea. He took some of that filtered flour and mixed it with some other ingredients to make what looked exactly like brownies or peanut butter squares. They looked so real and appetizing that you'd never suspect anything was wrong with them. He left them in our break room and told us they were free treats for the staff. Like clockwork, someone would always grab one, take a big bite, and then immediately spit it out. The taste was absolutely horrible. Imagine chewing on old, burnt flour mixed with the essence of everything that had ever been fried in that oil. It was nasty but completely harmless. We all got a good laugh out of it, and it became this running joke at the restaurant. Fast forward about 10 years later, I had moved on from the restaurant business and was working in sales and customer service at a large cable and internet company. The office had about 300 employees total, and I worked the second shift, which only had about 50 people. It was a pretty decent job, good benefits, and the work wasn't too stressful most of the time. But there was one major problem that was driving me absolutely crazy. Every single night someone was stealing my food from the break room refrigerator. I'd bring my lunch or dinner, put it in the fridge with my name clearly written on it, and by the time I went to eat it, it would be gone. This wasn't happening once in a while, it was literally every night. I tried everything I could think of. I wrote bigger labels with my name, I put my food in different containers, I even tried hiding it behind other people's food. Nothing worked. This person was determined to steal my meals, and it was costing me money because I had to buy food from the vending machines or order delivery instead. After about 2 months of this happening, I was fed up. I decided I needed to teach this food thief a lesson they'd never forget. My first idea was to make some brownies with laxatives baked into them. I figured whoever was stealing my food would get sick and learn their lesson the hard way. But when I mentioned my plan to my roommates, they immediately shot it down. They explained that if someone got really sick or had to go to the hospital, I could get fired or even face legal trouble. They were right, and I realized I needed a different approach. That's when I remembered the old guy from Hooters and his fake brownies made from filtered fry oil flour. It was perfect. It would taste absolutely terrible and teach the thief a lesson, but it wouldn't actually harm anyone. It was just disgusting, not dangerous. I went to the grocery store and bought everything I needed to make Hooters-style buffalo wings. I got chicken wings, hot sauce, butter, celery, blue cheese dressing, and some flour for coating. My roommates and I spent the evening making about 30 or 40 wings using my little tabletop fryer. They actually turned out pretty good, and we had a nice dinner. When we finished eating, I let the oil cool down just enough to handle safely. Then I started filtering it just like we used to do at Hooters. I collected all that nasty flour residue and mixed it with some other ingredients to make it look like legitimate brownies. They looked so convincing that even I was impressed with my handiwork. The next night I took my fake brownies to work and put them in the break room refrigerator in a container clearly marked with my name. Then I went to my desk, which was positioned perfectly near the break room where I could keep an eye on things. About 2 hours into my shift, I heard this horrible hacking and coughing coming from the break room. When I looked over, I saw one of the quality service managers spitting all over the floor and screaming about who had tried to poison her. She was making this huge scene, yelling and carrying on like someone had tried to kill her. I just started laughing. The whole situation was so ridiculous and satisfying after months of having my food stolen. She noticed me laughing and immediately walked over to my supervisor to complain about me. My supervisor called me into his office and asked what I thought was so funny about someone supposedly being poisoned. I explained the whole situation to him, how someone had been stealing my food every night for months, how I'd made fake brownies using the old Hooters trick, and how they were completely harmless but tasted terrible. At first, he was trying to stay professional and serious, but when I explained what had happened, I could see him trying not to smile. When I assured him that the brownies weren't actually poisonous or dangerous, just disgusting, he completely cracked up laughing. When he realized that nobody was actually in danger and that this woman had brought the whole thing on herself by stealing food that clearly wasn't hers, he told me to go back to work. But the story doesn't end there. The quality service manager got written up for taking someone else's food from the refrigerator. Apparently, the company had a strict policy about that kind of thing, and since she had basically admitted to stealing my food by complaining about it, she got in trouble with human resources. I made sure to tell everyone in the office what had happened. Word spread quickly, and soon the whole second shift knew about the fake brownies and how the food thief had finally been caught. People thought it was hilarious, and I became something of a legend around the office. My food never got stolen again. Not once. Apparently, word had gotten around about what would happen to food thieves, and nobody wanted to risk it. I could finally eat my own meals in peace. The quality service manager tried to make my work life difficult for a while after that, but it didn't last long. She was so embarrassed by the whole incident that she ended up leaving the company just a few months later. I heard she found a job somewhere else, hopefully where she learned to bring her own lunch. I was 24 and working as a bartender at Downtown Groove, a popular dance club in the city. I'd been there for about 8 months, and honestly, I loved the job most of the time. The music was loud, the crowd was energetic, and the tips were usually decent enough to help me pay my way through college. I'd started working there after my previous job at a coffee shop wasn't cutting it financially. Between tuition, rent, and basic living expenses, I needed something that paid better. A friend of mine who worked security at Downtown Groove told me they were hiring bartenders, and since I'd picked up some basic drink-making skills from watching YouTube videos and practicing at home, I figured I'd give it a shot. The manager liked that I was friendly and could handle pressure, so he hired me on the spot. The job was intense but fun. Friday and Saturday nights were absolutely crazy, with people packed shoulder to shoulder on the dance floor and 3 deep at the bar. I'd learned to move fast, remember multiple orders at once, and keep a smile on my face even when things got hectic. Most customers were pretty cool, they understood it was loud and busy, they'd wait their turn, and they'd tip reasonably well. But then there was this one guy who became a regular problem. He'd show up every Friday night like clockwork, always around 9:30 p.m. Middle-aged, wearing the same type of polo shirt every week, and with this attitude like the world owed him something. The first time I served him, I thought maybe he was just having a bad night. He ordered a whiskey sour, which was simple enough, but when I told him the price, he literally threw the money at me. Not handed it to me, threw it. The bill scattered across the wet bar top, and I had to chase down a 20 that almost fell into the ice bin. I figured it was a one-time thing. Maybe he was drunk or distracted. But the next week, same thing. And the week after that, every single time he'd order his whiskey sour, I'd tell him the price, and he'd just toss the money in my general direction like I was some kind of vending machine. Never a please or thank you, never a tip, just this dismissive attitude that made my skin crawl. But the money throwing wasn't even the worst part. After he'd get his drink, he'd plant himself right in front of my section of the bar and just stand there. Not dancing, not really talking to anyone, just taking up prime real estate where other customers needed to stand to order drinks. I'd have people trying to squeeze around him, waving money over his head, practically climbing over him to get my attention. And he'd just stand there like a statue, completely oblivious to or uncaring about the chaos he was causing. I tried being polite about it at first. I'd lean over and ask him if he could maybe move down a bit so other customers could get to the bar. He'd look at me like I'd just asked him to solve calculus, shrug, and maybe shuffle 6 inches to the left. 5 minutes later, he'd be right back in the same spot. Week after week this went on. My co-workers started noticing too. Sarah, who worked the other end of the bar, would roll her eyes whenever she saw him come in. Even Marcus, our bouncer, mentioned that the guy seemed like a real piece of work, but management's policy was pretty much to put up with anything when customers weren't starting fights or breaking things. The breaking point came on what had already been one of the most stressful nights I'd had in months. We were short-staffed because 2 people had called in sick, the music system had been acting up all evening, and we'd had a bachelorette party of 12 women who kept changing their minds about their complicated cocktail orders. I was already running on fumes when 9:30 p.m. rolled around. Sure enough, in walked my least favorite regular. Same polo shirt, same entitled swagger. He muscled his way to the front of my section, completely cutting in front of a young couple who'd been waiting patiently for 10 minutes. The guy looked at me and just pointed at the whiskey bottle, like I was supposed to read his mind. I was so tired and frustrated that I almost snapped right then, but I took a deep breath and made his drink. When I set it down, he just stood there staring at me. I told him the price was $8.50. Without a word, he pulled out a $10 bill and just flicked it at me like he was feeding a pigeon. The bill hit my chest and fluttered down onto the sticky bar floor. I had to bend down and pick it up while he stood there looking bored. That was it. Something inside me just snapped. I walked over to the register, punched in his order, and pulled out his change, a $1 bill and 2 quarters. Instead of handing it to him like a normal human being, I held the coins up so he could see them clearly. Then I threw them down toward the counter hard. The quarters hit the bar top and went flying in opposite directions. One bounced off into the crowd on the dance floor, and the other ricocheted toward the wall. The dollar bill fluttered dramatically through the air before landing somewhere near the beer taps. His jaw literally dropped. For the first time since I've been serving him, he looked genuinely shocked. I told him oops, and that it looked like his change got away from him. He stared at me for a second, then at his scattered money. The dance floor was packed, and people were stepping all over the place where his quarters had landed. If he wanted his $1.50 back, he was going to have to get down on his hands and knees and crawl around in the dark, dodging dancing feet and spilled drinks. He asked me if I was serious right now. I told him that accidents happen, just like when people throw money at other people instead of handing it to them. He looked at the chaos on the dance floor, looked back at me, and I could tell he was trying to decide if $1.50 was worth his dignity. Apparently it was, because he actually got down and started scrambling around looking for his change. It was honestly beautiful to watch. Here was this guy who'd been treating me like dirt for months, now crawling around on a sticky club floor while people accidentally kicked him and stepped on his hands. It took him almost 5 minutes to find both quarters, and by the time he stood back up, his polo shirt was stained and his hair was disheveled. He grabbed his drink without making eye contact and disappeared into the crowd. I didn't see him for the rest of the night. The next Friday I was wondering if he'd show up. Part of me hoped he would. I was curious to see if he'd learned anything from the experience. Sure enough, 9:30 p.m. came around, and there he was. But this time was different. He waited in line like everyone else instead of cutting. When he got to the bar, he actually made eye contact and politely asked for a whiskey sour. The word "please" coming out of his mouth hit my ears like music. I made his drink and set it down. I told him it was $8.50, and he pulled out exact change and placed it carefully on the bar top. Then he took his drink and walked away to find somewhere else to stand that wasn't directly blocking other customers. He kept coming back every Friday, but his whole attitude had changed. He'd wait his turn, say please and thank you, and he even started leaving small tips. Nothing crazy but 50 cents or $1, which was infinitely better than nothing. Most importantly, he stopped camping out right in front of my section of the bar. Word got around among the staff about what had happened, and it became this legendary story that people would tell new employees. Sarah started calling it the night the regular learned manners. Even the manager heard about it eventually and just laughed. Apparently, he'd been getting complaints about that customer's behavior too, but nobody had found a way to address it without causing a scene. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.